welcome everyone. And today we're very happy to have both Fabian and Vogelsteller from Lukso and Martin Quensel from Centrifuge joining us to talk a little bit about what they have been working on for the last period of time. I know tiny bits and pieces of it, but I would rather just hand over to Fabian to kick off and tell us more about the RICO, or the reverse ICO. It sounds very interesting in Spanish, actually. So
RICO. Yeah,
exactly.
In US American, it will be the opposite. It's not tasty anymore. It's
RICO.
The RICO. Yeah, the RICO in the US is a law which is called the Racketeer and Criminal Organizations Act or something like that. Racketeer, whatever. Which is a law that actually allows the state to confiscate money from the heads of mafia structures, which is actually very fitting with the RICO, but it's actually seen as a negative thing in the US, which is kind of funny, right? I'm not sure why this is a bad thing that you take away from the mafia, but for whatever reason they always associate it with criminal things.
Okay, but you're sticking with this branding for now, or
the name is done.
That's it.
I think it's coming back to Goodfellas or not. I think the movie is about when RICO was introduced.
There's also the latest Westworld movie, the app which you can use to actually ask people to do criminal things, for example, extradite people or steal money or whatever, is also called RICO. So not sure what's going on with the RICO. So. Okay, I would share my screen. You probably have to enable that.
Yeah. Sandeep, I think you need to unshare first. I think you should be able to share right now.
All right. No. Not yet.
Then try again.
Now, yeah.
We're getting better at this. Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
We can see your screen. Thank you so much for joining, and it's all floor is all yours.
Okay. All right. Share shortly about my background. So I have been in the blockchain space, and particularly in the Ethereum space, since quite a while. I'm probably counting as a blockchain veteran. I joined in January 2015 the Ethereum Foundation, and I have been part of it since the early days. I've built the first user interfaces or applications to actually interact with smart contracts. One is called the Mist browser. Another one was the Ethereum wallet. I also built the most used developer tool in the blockchain space called Web3.js, which is the library almost every dev developer is using on a daily basis. I proposed a standard called ERC20 that you're all familiar with, I assume. And I proposed another standard called ERC725 that actually would be very relevant at Lukso. And since 1.5 years, I'm working on Lukso, and as well as the reversible ICO, which I'm talking about a little bit now. So Lukso is basically a blockchain for the new digital lifestyle space, how we call it. It's a blockchain that's dedicated to non-financial blockchain and app use cases, and is meant to actually bring the influencers, the fashion, the creative people into using blockchain by making a network which dedicates applications and protocols and standards to these audiences. So if everybody thinks about how we can bring blockchain to mainstream, my opinion, that is exactly the way of how you do it. We're also very fortunate because, especially the fashion space, which we're really well connected with, is kind of experiencing a disruption right now, something that's incoming to them and they're not fully understanding it. Good opportunity. But we have basically a really strong move towards digital. I mean, if like my generation, or especially the generation before me, probably thought, oh, the internet is something that's going away. You know, it's just for a little bit here and then, you know, then it's not important. the Gen Z is definitely very sure it's not going anywhere else. We are experiencing a complete different consumer behavior. We're experiencing a complete different user. I think after Corona, everybody has gotten that the digital is important, and the digital is, I mean, that's what makes us right now be able to talk here, even though we're using the worst version of digital interactivity, which is video calls or audio calls. That's going to get a lot better using virtual reality. But there's also a strong merging of the physical and the digital world. And we see that on all fronts. But especially what I'm talking here about, the digital worlds using virtual reality and AR, which is coming heavily, but also things which has to do with gaming. So gaming in the past was considered more like, okay, that's what kids play. Today, the gamer community is probably a lot of very older people as well, and it's very large. And in fact, the biggest sport events around are esports events that sometimes get more viewers than even certain physical sport events. And there's something emerging called purely digital fashion. And purely digital fashion is kind of like, it's taking this whole fashion space by surprise and by storm as well, because everybody's super curious of what that means and what that, how that works and all of this. And it's so interesting that even players like Louis Vuitton, for example, design a League of Legends avatar for the winner of a League of Legends game or championship. So big brands are looking into this. And what that means, purely virtual fashion, that means clothes that don't do physically exist ever. There are only 3D clothes that are created to either wear them taking an Instagram picture using AR technology. Currently, it's a lot of manual mapping, or it's something that you can actually wear and take into a game, or wear in a virtual reality environment. And VR meetings will be a thing. We have now actually ETH-VR. I gave a talk at the ETH-VR 1, the first ETH-VR, or the second, there was an ETH-VR 0 before. But the first official one, where I talked about Lukso in VR to a virtual audience. And that's a very different way of interacting with people, because you have a complete different sense of presence, you have a sense of size, you have a sense of distance, you have a sense of who's paying attention, who's not. And you have exactly the same restrictions, on sometimes even less restrictions than the physical world. Means when you talk to somebody and he's far away, that you hear him more quiet, you have to walk to him, talk to him, and so on. So virtual fashion, digital fashion is a huge deal in that world as well, but as well as gaming. There's also another aspect where the fashion world right now is being disrupted, which is basically making physical items ownable and digital transferable. That is especially important when we talk about counterfeit, or resolving the counterfeit problem, creating circular markets, allowing more transparency around items, including supply chain, even though that's not the focus of Lukso. But it basically allows these, especially luxury items, which are not costing little, to actually be digital ownable, to have a digital experience around them, which plays again into how communities are today super important. If you have the ability to know who owns something, or the ability to have somehow access to certain things, that creates a community that is way stronger binded around a brand, for example, or around interest than we have it today, right? Today you can be part of Gucci gang even with a fake. In the digital future, maybe not. But there's another important part, is that we basically have currently all our accounts and our profiles spread over many different social media places. So there is this concept of universal profiles, and that's where, for example, one of my standards comes in, UX 7-5, where we need universal profiles for public profiles and public personas, which especially is about companies, it's about creators and designers. And if you create a universal profile, you exist outside of these platforms first. And that allows you to have a complete different interaction with your community. It could be some sort of tokenized community It could be a way of how you can obviously prove, and issue items that are really ownable. So bringing the blockchain component to universal profiles is actually key for ownership in the internet. So we see Luxo as the network for all kind of creatives, designers, influencers, because they are the ones who have the current power in the internet, and they are the ones who actually determine the narrative and basically everything in the internet, right? An influencer today is far more powerful than even a large magazine. And that was 20 years unthinkable, right? Same with TV not existing anymore. YouTube already basically removed TV as such as we know it. So that brings me to the reversible ICO. So the Luxo story is a lot deeper, but that's a very shallow view on what we see happening on Luxo. We have actually written a white paper. It's 120 pages going into a lot more details and aspects on those things. And we have a lot of ideas of how this space will be very populated, and where blockchain actually is more interested to the rest of the world than it's today. Because today it's very male, between 30 and 35, between 25 and 35 or 40, and very nerdy and techy. I really like this saying, blockchain is everything you don't understand about computer with everything, combined with everything you don't understand about money. And that's really sadly true today. And it shouldn't be that, right? Ideally, you own things and you don't even know how it works. You can trust it works, but you don't have to go to exchanges and fiddle around with hex codes and gas fees and stuff like that. The reversible ICO has besides fundraising Luxo, has also another intention. And on the one hand, and let me make that a bit shorter, on the one hand, so ICOs are actually amazing. I know, everybody went crazy, and we had 2016, 17, and 18, and billions of dollars collected in ICOs. Some scams, some projects that collected way too much money, and all of these problems. But in the bottom, they are actually really great, because for the first time, at least initially, we had the ability to have a decentralized, anonymous crowd sale. And that itself is like a wow. Because if you wanted to collect any money, then you had a platform. It was slow. It was not decentralized, nor anonymous. And the way of how it worked was very limited, right? There was just this, give money here, PayPal there, and you hopefully get something. ICOs and the ability of having tokens that you get in return, you have now the ability to actually interact with your stakeholders, right? Or your stakeholders are instantly able to somehow interact with the protocol or whatever. The problem really is that we had this kind of lock-ins. I showed us here. We had these lock-ins. We had scams. There was no investor protection. There was very little responsibility of the project sometimes. So you have to think that they collected far more than expected, especially in the high times of the ICOs. And then the idea was Lambo instead of project, and that kind of led to a few problems. The idea with the reversible ICO is actually to make that safer and to make it actually more fair and more balanced between investors and the creators of the project. And I do believe that needs this, especially third piece, which is the personal choice aspect. I think it's very important. But if you combine personal choice and increased responsibility for the project and this automated investor protection, when we have blockchain, we can create security by design. And another reason of why I was really pushing for that is, if we're doing these kind of ICOs and now all the regulators think, oh my God, we have to do something here, regulated, blah, blah, blah. We might kill a huge opportunity when we have the best technology at hand, which can do security by design, right? We have a already automated machine. We can just give good rules. We have a safe mechanism to invest. And in fact, I would say that currently the reversible ICO is the safest investment ever, because you really just buy it so slow that you can think 3 times over it or 50 times over it if it was a wise decision or not. So how does it work? And the examples here in Lux. So Lux is the native cryptocurrency of Luxo. It's basically your way of paying for transaction fees on the future Luxo network, and stake on the network. So in very simple terms, it's basically a buying over time. It's basically you are not buying instantly, which was exactly what ICOs did. Send Ether here, get tokens out. It's buying over time. And when you have this buying over time, it gives you the ability to reconsider your choices, and you hopefully end up with all the investors that actually believe in you, because it's the one which stay long-term in, and all the flippers and all the doubters are out. And you have a good solid basis that when you start the protocol, or when the network starts, you have a completely different set of investors in the bottom. Basically in the basics of how it works is you have different stages, or in this case, different months. Actually, this is an old presentation. We have now a reversible ICO 2.0, so we'll explain the new version. It's very much the same. The difference is previously we had it time-based. So the prices were increasing each month time-based, and that version still exists. And you know, projects could use it as well. We changed it to demand-based. That means basically if a certain amount of Lux is bought up, the price increases. So every 500,000 Lux bought, the price increases. That I think is a better model when we're thinking about the demand, because it's demand-based. It's not time-based. In the high times of the ICO, probably the time-based one would have worked as well, because people were very eager to invest all the time. In the more slow market we are right now, I think a demand-based is more a realistic reflection. But basically, you have this commit phase, which is really just the idea of an accumulation phase. So everybody can go in, reserve some Lux, get could instantly give these Lux back, and have basically bought nothing. So basically, it's a way where you can save your seat on the table without that you start paying for the food. and this was actually meant mainly for especially the stormy times where you allocate all the people who want to be in without it as first a risk in the early times, in the early time of the project. And then over time, the project is buying linear, actually the users are buying linear the tokens, means the project is receiving linear the Ether in the reversible ICO. That means you can very much predictably know how much you have bought when, how much Lux you can actually move by which point in time, and how much Ether you could potentially still reverse at which point in time, because it's completely predictable, gradual linear. Price, before there were price changes, now it's demand changes, demand-based, so every 500,000 Lux the price increases. And if you could basically at any point in time decide to return your Lux and get part of your Ether back. Obviously, for the one Lux which are unlocked, you cannot return your Ether, obviously, because you bought them. That means also the project will get Ether over time. People have more certainty to rethink their decisions, and it's kind of more held accountable also to the progress it makes over time. That's basically the reversible ICO in a nutshell. And what I can do, I can show you how it's currently looking live. So this is the reversible ICO website running live right now. We have 106 Ether committed. It's just a few days old. We have $80,000 pending. So this pending means they are in the process of doing the KYC or waiting or doing whatever they want. We have here a chart that shows kind of how much it came in over time. And the actual Ether we get is this. So we currently so far have received half an Ether by that point in time, 0.57 Ether. And here you can see the actual amount flowing per second. It should be per second, yeah. And basically the more tricky part is you do need to have Ether to participate, right? It's a smart contract, it's a blockchain. And you can then check your balance. You can use MetaMask for easy integration. You can participate with all kinds of, I'm not sure if that's probably an empty account. Yeah, so this is how it technically works. But what's really interesting is that basically I wanted to come back also to how ICOs worked in the past. And when you have participated once and your address was whitelisted because you did the KYC, basically participating in the reversible ICO as simple as sending Ether to it, that gives you back Lux. When sending your Lux back, that gives you back the Ether. And let me check this. An address here, I think this one, here you can nicely see how it actually works. So this address is currently, wow. It has committed 26 Ether in total, or 26 Ether in total. It can still reverse 25.85 Lux. This is the amount of Lux you can still return, so it's 21,500. And he has currently unlocked 117 Lux. So this is the amount. So his balance will show this on any normal wallet, but 117 is the only thing you can actually move, because the rest is still reversible and therefore it's locked. And yeah, that's how it works. So you can like see your numbers go up in real time. And what it does is basically it calculates it based on time and based on how much you have committed. It was quite a challenge to get this all into a smart contract, but we have achieved it. All right, this is the reversible ICO in a nutshell. There's any questions? Either we do the questions now or we go to the next presentation.
Yeah, let's see if there are questions. Anyone?
So just to get it right, when let's say I invest in your reversible ICO, and after a while I think, oh, it's not turning out as I expected it to be, I can just send it back to the smart contract and receive my Ethereum back, or how does it work?
Basically, I mean, you can basically, there's an amount of Lux you can still return. This is the one which is locked, which you cannot move. And this one you can return back and you get like exactly the Ether for that amount of Lux out that you bought it for. So yeah, so basically what happens is you buy over time, technically speaking. So it's in a way like in a, in German terms, it would be a Lastschriftkonto. Because you have it on an account that is in your control and you deduct automatically, your payments to, I mean, that's how it mentally could work, right? Technically.
Yeah, like a Dauerüberweisung, right?
Yeah. Something like that, yeah. Technically, that's how it works, yeah.
And then also with Lastschriftrückgabe or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in this case,
in a way.
In this case, you would just stop. I mean, the moment you move your Ether out, you stop the contribution process.
Mm-hmm. Ah, okay.
That's the moment when you basically would empty the Lastschriftkonto. That's kind of how you would do it.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on, like you switch it right now to the demand, and before it was like time-based, and I thought the time-based thing is pretty neat because then you can see how you execute over time, and now you switched it to demand. I don't really get why. Just maybe I missed something.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, there was a little bit of a little story here happening. So basically, we had it before that every month the price increases. Problem with that is, if you have no demand, the price would still increase, and then basically, let's say if people find it already too expensive, then it makes it even less likely that they go in when it goes even more expensive for no reason, right? So that time passing is a little bit of a problem. So actually, when we started the initial reversible ICO, and there was like a huge market demand, and market was going up on KuCoin and so on, and we set it at a certain price, which was, I think, 30 something cents, I think 34 cents. Problem is Ether went up basically exactly the next day. And because everything here is in Ether, suddenly the Lux was costing 48 cents. And the market on the KuCoin there was a 12 cents spread at some point. So means the market, there was not demand on the market, then they see the high price because Ether rising, and that was just problematic. So we basically we deployed the reversible ICO. We basically asked everybody, send your Lux back. You know, they all basically just reversed. Really nice test too. Everybody reversed the Lux nicely.
Doesn't work.
They all reversed their Lux. We redeployed the reversible ICO. Sadly, the old reversible ICO had a very nice identicon, and now we have a not so nice identicon. The previous one looked like a lion. I really loved it, but yeah, you cannot always like keep it identicon. It's generated, right? So, but basically, what happened is we also in that move we also considered the pricing. So basically, now it's demand based. So you see these lines here. Every time it will cross one of these lines, the price will move up. So basically, the more demand there is, and then actually is for the committed ether. That's what moves the price, not the pending ether. Because otherwise, some anonymous person could just push the price for no reason, you know, and then move his money out again. So it's only for the committed ether which actually pushes the price, but it's actually more realistic. That the moment you see demand growing and coming in, then that's when people would be more active because they obviously missed the slot, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Thanks.
Okay, Fabian, I have one question here. In the initial case, you said that you're setting it for 8 months, let's say, where the conversion gradually happens depending on how much money or how much ether is being put in, right? So when you switch to the demand mode, do you still have that? You still have that. Okay.
Yeah. So the buying is just started now here.
Okay.
Just started buying, and you might even see the. Now you can't see it yet. Let's let a few days go, and you will see the slight gray appearing, but it will still end on February 21st. So yes, it's still 8 months.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, they could be during this time. It could be sold out, but it could also that somebody reverses then, and then you know there's something available again at some point. So yeah, it will still take 8 months before we get 100% of whatever people put in into the.
People put in. Okay.
That is
and then when it comes to the whole supply, the regular economics work, right? How you distribute it with teams, with the foundation itself, and so on and so forth, or is that also something needs to be, or is that something completely different or to be addressed separately?
Yeah. So you probably, if you're talking about the token distribution. Yeah. So that's still the same. So this hasn't changed.
Okay.
No, this is thought out a lot longer for the reversible ICO. Right now, what we have done is we have split the reversible ICO in two. So first we will sell the first 10 million, see how this is going, and then we add the second.
Right.
Enough demand.
Yep.
But the rest of the structure and distribution is still the same. You can all check it out on ryko.luxo.network.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Now I have one more question. This is probably related or with DICO model. So like for me, DICO is a bit interesting in the sense that you're asking somebody to like evaluate and then release the tokens, right? Like in a simple language. But of course, there's the challenge. I think also in your article you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges is that making people to vote.
Yeah. So it's basically the oracle problem you have here, right? So if you depend on a third party that now has to judge if something works or what doesn't work, then exactly, you know, that party could be corrupt. That party could, you know, be knowledgeable or not sometimes. Maybe sometimes they misjudge something. So I believe in the wisdom of the crowd. I think on the end, the market and the crowd can better decide. And therefore you have in the reversible ICO, and that's why I think it's better actually the DICO idea. Anybody can just reverse by himself. So it's basically anybody can make that personal decision. It doesn't have to wait for people to come to vote. And what we have seen with the DAO is that this can be a huge problem, right? So imagine there's some kind of like tragic event and you want to get on your money and you can't, or because you have to wait for people to stop and put it in a free state and to revert everything. Yeah, it's also a question of interfaces. You would need a custom interface. the beauty of the reversible ICO is that technically you could just participate with a standard wallet. You would need nothing else because your interaction with it is send Ether and send the tokens back.
Right.
Only problem is in the first time you're contributing, you do have to add some data field. So we make sure that the addresses which are participating are actually able to, do custom gas and custom data fields, because if not, they might have the money stuck. And also prevents from sending that we can receive it from exchanges, which is really nice too. So you cannot just, happen a lot. People withdraw from an exchange to an ICO and think, oh, it's a good idea.
Right. Okay. One last question regarding the when a lot of people start pulling out Ether, for example. So the price or the conversion is, you said it's based on the demand, but when you have a reverse demand, does it bring it back to the old conversions, or does it apply a new mechanics there?
So basically, the first of if you get your Ether out, you get the amount out you put in. I mean,
Yes.
there might be slight rounding differences, but you basically, for the tokens you can still return, you get exactly what you paid as a price. Because it's measured based on your committed Ether and not on anybody else's committed Ether. On the other hand, the price will obviously, if demand goes out and people will uncommit, then the price will go lower again.
Will go lower, right?
The price doesn't stay fixed. That was actually an important point. Do we keep it then fixed there? But I think it's more realistic to bring it back, right? Because the demand goes away. So
yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Interesting.
Great. Well, then let's perhaps move on to Centrifuge, where Martin will be talking about today. Do you have anything to share, Martin?
Yeah, sure. Let me start.
Good. I think that should be possible.
Sharing my screen.
Yes.
I hope you see something.
Fantastic. All right.
Just a few slides. A little introduction. So I'm co-founder of Centrifuge. I had not that amazing of a blockchain career like you, Fabian. So that was, I had my first startup in 2000, but really went into, the crypto world in first ideas 2016. But really, when we set Centrifuge up, that had the idea was at the end of 2017, and really started to kick it off with a small team, which was then growing in 2018. Yeah, what we're doing is went through a little kind of a little bit of pivoting, I guess. So decentralized financing is what we actually we would like to have a box to put us in where we believe we deliver on. What the issue we would like to tackle, So we look at supply chains and how they are financed. So what is out there in the world is bought and sold, purchased and distributed in whatever supply chain you can think of, And surprisingly, really the global B2B spend, just what companies spend on whatever they purchase to produce what they produce, from raw materials to whatever custodies, paying the employees, etc. That is really bigger than the global GDP on the planet. So I think the global GDP is something like 110-ish, I think currently, maybe a little bit lower. This Corona, $1 trillion US. The global trade, global B2B spend is kind of projected around 180 trillion. US dollars. So if you really look down, hey, what is actually happening here is that I think I need to move that a little bit up. That is maybe missing here. I don't know. I picked the wrong slide. Excuse me. Now, what the real issue is really is that every one of those payments and of those business relationships between companies is actually happening on I send you an invoice and I pay you in whatever days. That is called payment terms. You sometimes have that even in B2C now, where you can say, hey, I do not pay now, but I pay per invoice. whatever, Klarna, I don't know if you know that, and you can even pay in 14 days. In the B2B space, that is the case since ever. And the payment terms actually over the last maybe 20 years really have increased to, I think, a global average, which comes close to 60 days now. So that really means that almost 30 trillion of the 180 trillion are locked in a supply chain. So it's just, $30 trillion out there where suppliers wait to get paid. What was the answer? Of course, banks like that issue because they could deploy some money there and make some money. Is that actually only something like 10% of this market, which 3 trillion, is currently actually addressed. And the company I had before, Centrifuge Taulia, centralized platform, addressing this issue. Just to compare that, had an annual financing volume of $20 billion in the last year. So any questions here? We can, I think, hey, it's a small round, just interrupt me. And how would we like to address that using decentralized technology is creating actually a decentralized protocol to finance those assets and actually remove the middleman in the first step. And the middleman is really think of the banks required actually to pull up the money, deploy it in those supply chains. And how do we do that is actually that we bring asset originators and lenders or investors, the left and the right side, together on our protocol and help in the protocol to make those illiquid assets, think of an invoice, in liquid asset where almost everyone, if you wish, can invest in. How it works is think of an asset originator. You asked me for the fortunate coincidence at the beginning of the meeting. I have one right here. It was really a surprise to see here. I think Alejandro, you are still in the call, I guess. Huh? So you said briefly hello before. Alejandro is one of our partners, Quensel Freight, so one of the asset originators here I'm mentioning, excuse me. What Quensel Freight, for example, is doing, they offer freight forwarders, so companies actually helping other companies to ship something from A to B, from China to Mexico or whatever, on their digital platform, where you can actually, book a freight forwarder to transport, deliver your material from A to B. Of course, those freight forwarders, they get an order, confirm the order, finally do the delivery, and then invoice. And paying those invoices is again, combined with payment terms. So those freight forwarders wait, I think, an average 45 days for their payment, and that is where we tokenize those invoices. Put them together in what we call a pool. And then this pool is securitized with a special structure and is creating, again, coming back to what Fabian has invented, ERC20 token. So it's really like a structure where you can see an invoice which is validated, comes from a platform like Alejandro's Quensel Freight, is actually, if it is validated, minting an NFT, a non-fungible token, ERC721, that goes into a pool. In this pool, it has a specific securitization structure. It also is, of course, has defined what is the interest. The freight forwarder on Quensel Freight, for example, needs to pay for it, and then is issuing shares of this pool ERC20 token. Then everyone actually, as a lender, can invest in such ERC20 tokens. Any questions here? I hope I did not lost anyone here. Cool. Alejandro, maybe if you would like to give a short hint if you're here on the call. How does it work? What was your experience so far?
Thanks, Martin. It's really interesting, right? Especially for us because we're coming from such a different industry, right? And starting to experience blockchain and DeFi as like a first hand is definitely. It has been a challenge, but it has been a really exciting challenge for us. We clearly see all the potential that DeFi can bring to the freight forwarding industry and to the logistics industry, especially now with the COVID. You can see like freight forwarders are screaming for liquidity, and the fact that we can find an alternative source liquidity is something that for freight forwarders, when we're explaining this concept to the freight forwarders, is unheard of. They don't understand it. But as soon as you are telling them, look, there are different sources than banks for you to get liquidity, that's magic for them, right? And they're willing to cooperate, and it has been fantastic. We just finished the first pool, we're running on the second one, and every single time we're just trying to improve this to just take it to the masses. They see it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really, coincidence that Alejandro is here. It wasn't planned. Thanks. Yeah, so that is not really DeFi, what I've described. That is actually a decentralized protocol running on Ethereum. Tinlake is all smart contracts, so all the process I have described, is all happening on Ethereum, open to asset originators and to lenders on both sides, but it's not really DeFi. I think it gets DeFi if the ERC20 tokens really being plugged into DeFi lending protocols, and that's what we are about to do. So with MakerDAO as a first DeFi protocol, we plug actually our ERC20 tokens in there. That then there is a Maker Vault where you can actually lend against it. So I don't know if you're familiar with MakerDAO. I don't know. Any questions here? Shall I explain a little bit how that works or what it is, just to describe a little bit the potential and in the future?
I mean, sure. You probably should say a sentence about it.
Okay, I can say something about it. So what Maker is actually is a platform, one of the, I think, earliest and biggest platforms on Ethereum, and also the biggest in the DeFi space is actually a synthetic assets protocol. So what they do is currently you can lock in cryptocurrencies like Ether, like USDC, like the basic attention token. I think also RedBTC already, and use that as a collateral and actually redeem for that collateral, borrow for that collateral in synthetic asset, and this synthetic asset is called DAI. It's actually acting as a stable coin, so the aim here is that DAI is pegged to the US dollar. One DAI actually acts as a replacement for the US dollar and should versus be $1. It's a little bit volatile, so it's really going up and down, especially Black Thursday, the 12th of March, was causing a few issues. What they actually do is, like every central bank would do that, they just, there's a DAI savings rate, so the interest rate you need to pay for those collaterals, they actually control demand and supply and trying to keep the DAI stable. That's what we would use as a source of funding then in the future. So there is a community, it's a DAO again, which is actually in a community process looking at assets which would like to join the platform. And we actually, it is called a maker improvement process at the MIP6 stage. There the first votes are happening, and both of our assets, and one of them is Quensel Freight, are actually voted to the next stage. So if I'm optimistic, maybe in the second half of the year, we have those assets and live on Maker. That means then that the lenders are not actually centralized lenders. So whoever who wants to buy, one of the tokens, a Tinlake pool is actually issuing, directly investing in it. No, you can also then do that through the first DeFi protocol like Maker. So invest in Maker, put there the DAIs in, and then Maker is doing it for you. Or other protocols to come in the future. I think they can also then see the money Legos of DeFi playing a little bit better together and actually opening DeFi up for real world assets. So what we call those invoices, actually real world assets, just to differentiate them a little bit from the assets in the blockchain space. So the crypto assets I've just mentioned before, for example. I think that is a way actually to increase the demand for DeFi as a protocol and just to grow and in an order of magnitude to what we see there today, because that is really tapping into this big bubble I've shown you, the 180 trillion global trade, the 30 trillion actually being locked in the supply chain, and actually only 3 trillion of those 30 trillion are actually kind of financed today. And what we are actually most likely looking at is not kind of, stealing the business of existing players there. So look at the already financed 3 trillions, but look at ways where the other 27 trillions actually can be can be accessed and unlocked, like here with Alejandro, where it's just a much more flexible way to attract that to a completely new group of investors who can invest in assets they had no ability to invest in before. It was just a few banks or platforms like Taulia, but also for asset originators, where depending on the size, where they're located, what the business is about, they may have issues really, get into a factoring agreement, a supply chain finance agreement with the bank because they're just too small, or they're in the wrong region of the world, etc. If we believe we can really make a difference. Any questions so far? If not, I have here a little slide actually, putting the Legos a little bit together. So what Centrifuge is actually providing is, I mentioned it already, this blue thing here that is really the asset collateralization, securitization protocol on Ethereum. That maybe in the future is, kind of combined with other dApps. We think of dApps for originating, for risk assessment, underwriting, whatever. DeFi on top, I explained that with Maker, and now actually to those parts of the protocol which I didn't talk about. So we have an own blockchain. It's a Centrifuge chain that went live on the 26th of May. It was already a little bit live before, just to not really announce it, but that is public. It's a proof of stake chain based on Substrate, and I think we have currently something like 14 validators like PureStake, Chorus One, etc. Operating validation nodes on our chain. And this chain is actually used currently not to operate Tinlake. Tinlake is running on Ethereum, really to actually be the origination platform. So think of, if Quensel Freight has freight forwarders on their platform, sending those invoices to a shipper or whatever, this invoice traffic is traveling on what we call here a P2P messaging protocol, where really, off-chain, those data is traveling between the involved parties, but actually an anchor, that is what we have here in the middle, which is linked to identities, just actually to hash values, and the anchor is actually a Merkle root of a Merkle document transferred on a P2P messaging protocol. They are already there on a Centrifuge chain and can be validated, so that you can really prove whenever an invoice was traveling between those identities, that back in the time, this data was exactly this data, and you cannot alter or tamper it anymore. And also actually the ability to mint NFTs is already on a Centrifuge chain, and then they are bridged. We have a bridge to Ethereum, then they're bridged to Ethereum, and from there they go into Tinlake. So every transfer of value, every, let's say, investment into the protocol really happens on Ethereum, which is of course much more decentralized, much more secure than our little proof of stake chain. Any questions here? I think I have a few more slides if you want, how the technology looks like, etc., to go into the details. I think I mentioned it with DAI, etc. So the really new thing currently is really kind of, it's removing the middleman. It's removing the middleman because of that actually the assets itself are tokenized and then kind of, made liquid with using Tinlake. It's an ERC20 token finally, and that you also actually invest in this ERC20 token, buy the ERC20 token with crypto. So we support a number of stable coins here, foremost USDC and DAI. So a pool is actually running either in USDC or DAI currently. You invest in one of those cryptocurrencies, buy the share in the pool, and then you're actually invested. Maybe
Martin, I had a question.
Sure.
Ricardo here. Just on general, thanks for the presentation. It's very, very interesting what you're doing. One thing I was curious about is you have this great infrastructure that you have developed and so on. And how are you dealing with just the general digitization or still needed digitization of supply chain documents and everything in this freight forwarding space? Because at least what I've heard in trade finance, use cases. And what I'm also seeing in our day-to-day activity is that there's still a lot of like paper and documents, and some companies don't even have ERP systems and so on. And how do you bridge this
We don't
gap?
do that. Yeah, very good question. Actually, we don't do that. That is why we have actually our asset originators. You know, where Quensel Freight, for example, is doing it on behalf of the freight forwarders. That's a digital platform where they, you know, do their business digitally on this platform and have already an electronic invoice. You know, so that is also Paperchain is another example. They are the ones who do the streaming revenue on Spotify and Apple Music, recorded. Actually also being a custodian for the music labels like Quensel Freight for the freight forwarders. So the digitization of assets is actually done by our asset originators, but using our technology.
So your strategy is also, is it to work with the freight forwarders and the companies directly, or to work with like integrators or service providers?
So I think, you know, the asset origination itself is typically something you do on top of a business process, and be not the one who would like to kind of, you know, automate business processes and make that more efficient. What we offer is technology actually to do that on top of the P2P and the anchoring and all these things, you know, where you can exchange documents and make sure that they, you know, that you have a single source of proof on Ethereum or on a centrifuge chain with an anchor and so on. But really the business logic itself, you don't touch it. And we believe you need the industry expertise, you know, you need, that's why, you know, you have an Amazon for B2C, and there are a monster, a Moloch, you know, but in B2B, you have not this one marketplace, because every of those marketplaces is very specific for the industry or a specific niche, because the business processes are much more complex there. You know, even in Ariba, I think most likely in SAP subsidiary, maybe the biggest B2B platform out there, there's something like 7 million businesses operating on it. It's just a tiny fraction. I think it's not even 1%, you know, on the global B2B trade going through Ariba, the biggest platform, the far biggest platform, you know, just to give you an idea.
And how do you like, so, and this is very interesting, and how, what's like your strategy to get into this space and get adoption among these different service providers in this industry who integrate your protocol as part of their business processes?
Yeah, that's maybe a good question. I'm not sure if you want to answer that, Alejandro. If I have you on a call, what was the reason reaching out to us and using the technology?
That's a fair point. For us, what it comes interesting was that when we're exploring actually all different sources of liquidity, right? We clearly see that at the scale that we were going to be putting the product, like a traditional financial companies wouldn't be an option. And also because usually the freight forwarders, they don't fit the regular standards for risk assessment, right? Like a financial institutions have a predefined like set of rules, and if you fit on those ones from the credit point of view, you are in. But if you are not, there's no middle ground. You are not accepted, right? And this will be an opportunity actually to start offering these services to SMEs or freight forwarders that are in the SME space, that even though they have a decent credit rating, they will never pass like a simple credit scoring cards, right? And that's one of the main reasons why we approach Maker and we approach Centrifuge.
Yeah. That's also, I think, not just because the businesses are maybe too tiny, or the relationship which is between, you know, a supplier and a customer, for example, is just too small to be interesting for a bank or a factoring company. It is also that it's really hard to assess a risk for smaller, maybe privately held companies, and that's also a real issue. You know, with Taulia, we tried. Actually, we were very successful with the model, which is also actually something we reuse here again. So what the advantage of platforms like Quensel Freight is actually that they operate the businesses for all the partners being involved, and they have full visibility on how they transact, how good, how bad, what the business history looks like, and creating data points which are very interesting for an investor. But currently, you know, the bank platform, the factoring platforms, they do not have the data. Mostly the best data have those credit insurance companies if it comes to, you know, non-supply chain platforms like Euler Hermes or Tradius or Cofas or whatever. But anyway, even those data, it's really behind, you know, that's not real time. What a Quensel rate has is real time. That plugging that into a banking financing, that's what we did with Taulia, you know, where we integrated into the ERP systems, built a platform, had full visibility in all the transactions, had a few banks on the platform, then investing in it, but the integration effort was just too high, and we just did that back there with big companies, you know, think of the Airbuses, Vodafones, Pfizers of the world. I think the technology we have here right now, that works for everyone, and that makes it so appealing, because here we can really help the SMEs of the world.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thanks. Makes sense.
Yeah, so here just, you know, sharing my screen here again, so that it's also public, everyone can access that if you go to Tinlake Centrifuge.io, and that is just a series 1. Alejandro has mentioned it's all small, so the numbers are not breathtaking, especially if you compare that with 30 trillion I've mentioned before. But what you can see here, if you scroll through the loans and see the transactions, that the already, you know, completely closed Series 1 or Pool 1, this Quensel rate was something like 49 invoices, I think, and something like $270,000 US. Yeah, that is where then everyone also, if you would like to invest, can invest, you know, where you can just go to the platform, click the I would like to invest button, and then you go through a KYC process with the asset originator. And then the structure is pretty much, you know, nothing new, pretty much traditional. This is an SPV actually operating both sides, but that the asset originator is doing it within framework where we help through, you know. So it's still KYC, but anyway, if you are KYC'd, if you're an accredited investor for Concentrate, you then can just buy tokens with your stable coins. That easy is this, you know. What was an asset which was inaccessible for someone like us, or, you know, a smaller credit fund, or also a DeFi protocol, that is now accessible, and it's not just the banks, you know. And that also, this liberation, I think, will also drive down the rates already. It looks high here, but for this market, it's actually very cheap. And also long term, with DeFi being involved, I think that will further drive the financing costs to the marginal costs. Actually, this more competition will take years, but we believe in it, and that's why we do that. I think, you know, one of the things where we see resistance is, of course, you know, hey, what should those KYC real world assets, trusting a centralized source like Concentrate, you know, I do not want them in a DeFi protocol, actually, you know, that contradicts crypto and decentralization. I think, you know, where the maker community, for example, kind of shifted a little bit into their kind of, you know, how view at it was actually also, again, the Black Thursday 12th, the March the 12th, just recently, when they had a few issues on the platform where they actually had seen, you know, if you have assets which are not correlated to crypto, where actually, you know, you have the Bitcoin price, and then almost every other token is somehow dependent on the crypto, on the Bitcoin price. And if the Bitcoin is going up and down, you can see that 99% of the market is moving. Anyway, Bitcoin is already, I think, 65 or whatever. So, and if you're in that bubble, you know, hey, that is very centralized and clustered. And having assets outside more reliable, that is just stabilizing the system, and also it's diversifying it. And that's why they feel it's very interesting. Just looking at those invoices, Concentrate has here, you know, they are not touched by Corona. That is for a delivery which will happen and which will be paid. Though the default rates you see there, they're increasing a little bit with a crisis like this, but not dramatically. You know, that is not a black swan event. The only thing that we have actually seen there in the market is that demand is just moving from, you know, what works not anymore if it comes to invoices, because someone stops producing trousers but is producing face masks now. You know, that's just a different thing, but that is still you know, where you have a supply chain and have invoices going through, and that actually, you know, the bankruptcy, the default of companies, of course, has increased, but not that dramatically, and also it's stretched over time. That you see there really a risk for invoice financing. You know, the default rate there, they didn't increase dramatically. It was more the case that the entire finance volume just went down. You know, if you look at the supply chain finance market, I think the overall supply chain finance market had a decrease of 20% or something like that. So, you know, just actually it was not the demand, it was the liquidity. So investors were less willing to invest. They just wanted to move to cash, you know. So talking here.
Martin,
Yeah.
can I pose a question considering your business model behind it? I mean, do you take like a matchmaking fee, or do you take a fee for creating these documents, or how's the business model behind it?
It's a completely token-driven business model. So the Centrifuge chain is operated with a staking governance token called Radial, and this Radial is, you know, the token we issue maybe in a reverse ICO in the future, and where we kind of, you know, finance a project in the future. We started this very traditional seed round with, you know, VCs still have some money in the bank, so don't expect too soon a token sale.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Any further questions for Martin from anyone?
Okay, I have a question. So I think the way I understood the platform works is there is a party that sort of converts the invoices electronically and processes them, right? So do you have any plans in the future where you want to reach out to the businesses that cannot or do not have such facilities? Because yeah.
So what it finally means is installing a centrifuge node, being part of the centrifuge chain, and also either with your own Ethereum client or within Fura, being connected to the Ethereum blockchain.
Right.
And I am not sure if every business on the planet is willing to do that. So that's why we actually go through asset originators. And we also, you know, that's where we started from, that the value proposition just for the decentralized, unstoppable exchange of business documents is just too early. You know, so we believe supply chain finance on top is actually the much more important driver behind than just the exchange of documents.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Then if there are no further questions, let's at least conclude the formal part. Thank you so much, Martin and Fabian, for joining us today and explaining a little bit more about what you do. I think it's some great insight for the community, and of course the opportunity to ask questions and to directly interact is very valuable for the people joining here. Thanks again.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.